Imagine spending 2 years of your life, your evenings, your weekends, your savings, building a product. You tell your friends it's coming, you tell yourself it's going to work, and then you launch it, and nothing happens. Nobody buys it. Not because you didn't work hard, but because you built something nobody actually wanted. That story happens more than most people realize, and it's not a story about failure. It's a story about waste. Wasted time, wasted money, wasted energy that could have been used to build something that actually worked. There's a better way, and today we're going to break it down. Here's why most people fail when starting a business, and it's not what you think. The traditional approach to starting a business goes like this. You have an idea, you write a business plan, you build out the product, you maybe raise some money, and then you launch. That model worked fine for factories and established industries. If you already know the market, know the customer, and know the process, a solid plan makes sense. But a startup is different. A startup exists under one defining condition: extreme uncertainty. You don't actually know who your customer is yet. You don't know if they'll pay for what you're building. You don't know which features matter. You're essentially making educated guesses and calling them a strategy. The problem is not that entrepreneurs aren't smart. The problem is that they treat those guesses as facts, invest months or years building around them, and only find out they were wrong after the money is gone and the time is spent. This is one of the biggest sources of waste in entrepreneurship. This is exactly the problem Eric Ries breaks down in The Lean Startup. So let's talk about the 3 mistakes at the root of this. The first mistake is planning instead of testing. Most new business owners come in with a plan, detailed, confident, sometimes even impressive. But a plan assumes you already have the answers. In a startup, you don't have answers yet. You have hypotheses. And a hypothesis needs to be tested, not executed. Here's the mistake. You spend 6 months building around an assumption that your customer wants feature X, but nobody validated that. You just believed it. And when you find out later that customers don't care about feature X at all, those 6 months don't come back. The second mistake is building too much too early. There's something exciting about building. It feels like progress. You add features, polish the design, make it look perfect. But here's the hard truth. If the core idea is wrong, none of that extra work matters. You've spent resources building on a broken foundation. The third mistake, and this one is subtle, is ignoring real customer behavior. Entrepreneurs love asking people, "Would you use this?" And people say yes, because they're being polite, or because it sounds good in theory. But what people say and what people actually do are completely different things. The most reliable feedback comes from what people actually do, especially when real commitment or payment is involved. These 3 mistakes compound each other. You plan too much, build too much, and validate too little. The result? Years of effort building the wrong thing. Eric Ries offers a different approach to this. At the core of it is a simple loop. 3 steps: build, measure, learn. Instead of planning for a year before testing anything, you start small. You build the simplest possible version of your idea, just enough to learn something real. Then you put it in front of real customers and measure how they respond. Then you take what you learned and use it to decide your next move. And then you repeat the loop, faster and faster, each cycle sharpening your understanding of what actually works. The power of this approach is that it replaces guessing with testing. You're not betting 2 years of your life on an assumption. You're making a small, fast bet and learning from it before the cost becomes too high. Dropbox is a perfect example of this. Dropbox is a file syncing product. It lets you access your files across all your devices. But here's the thing. When the founders wanted to test whether people actually wanted it, they couldn't easily build a prototype. The technology was complex. It would have taken months just to get a working demo. So instead, they made a video. A simple 3-minute demo showing how the product was supposed to work. They uploaded it, targeted it at early tech adopters, and waited. Their beta waiting list went from 5,000 people to 75,000 overnight. People were signing up for something that didn't fully exist yet. That video was the test, and it confirmed, before years of engineering, that real demand existed. That's the build, measure, learn loop in action. Now let's talk about what you actually build in that first stage. Eric Ries calls it the minimum viable product, or MVP. The MVP is not the finished product. It is the smallest, simplest version of your idea that lets you test your most important assumption. Nothing more, nothing less. Here's what an MVP is not. It's not an excuse to build something sloppy. It's not a half-finished product you're embarrassed to show. It is a deliberate, strategic test. Every element of it exists to answer a specific question. Airbnb, for example, started by renting out air mattresses in their own apartment. That was it. No fancy platform, no algorithm, no global booking system. Just two founders testing one question. Will strangers pay to stay in someone else's home? The answer was yes, and that single test became the foundation for a company that would go on to become one of the largest hospitality businesses in the world. Take Uber. They didn't launch with surge pricing, driver ratings, or a full app ecosystem. The founders tested the core idea first. Can we connect riders and drivers through a simple app and have people pay for it? Yes. Build on that. Scale from there. The principle is this. Don't build for scale before you know the idea works. Test the idea first. Scale second. But here's the question that every founder eventually faces. You've been running your loop. You've been testing, and the results are not great. Do you keep going, or do you change direction? This is what Eric Ries calls the pivot versus persevere decision. A pivot is not giving up. A pivot is changing your strategy while keeping your core vision. You're not quitting, you're adjusting based on what you've actually learned. Instagram is one of the most famous pivots in startup history. Instagram started as a different app entirely, a location-based check-in app called Bourbon. It had too many features, it was complicated, and users weren't really connecting with it. But the founders noticed something in the data. Users loved the photo sharing feature. That one feature was getting real engagement. So they stripped everything else away and rebuilt around just that. Instagram was born from that pivot, and it went on to be acquired by Facebook for $1 billion. The lesson isn't that you should change direction at the first sign of difficulty. Perseverance matters too. The lesson is that you should be paying close enough attention to your data to know the difference between a strategy that needs time and one that needs changing. Now we need to talk about one of the most important concepts in the entire book. Eric Ries calls it validated learning. Most people measure startup progress the wrong way. They count features built, lines of code written, hours worked. They feel productive, and they call it progress. But if none of that activity moves you closer to a customer who actually pays, it isn't. That's what Ries calls the illusion of progress. Validated learning redefines progress as this. What have you actually learned about your customers through real experiments with real data? Zappos is the clearest example of this in the book. Zappos is now one of the biggest online shoe retailers in the world, eventually acquired by Amazon for over $1 billion. But it did not start that way. The founder, Nick Swinmurn, had a hypothesis. People would buy shoes online if the experience was good enough. But instead of building a warehouse, creating a logistics system, and launching a full e-commerce platform, he did something almost absurdly simple. He walked into local shoe stores, asked if he could photograph their inventory, and posted the pictures online. If someone placed an order, he'd go back to the store, buy the shoes at full price, and ship them himself. No warehouse, no scale, no infrastructure. What he was doing was learning. He was gathering real data from real customers making real purchases. And that data, that validated learning, gave him the proof he needed to build the actual business. That's the difference between working hard and learning fast. The goal isn't just to be busy, it's to find out what's true as quickly as possible. So how do you apply all of this? It comes down to 4 things. Start with your riskiest assumption, the one thing your business depends on being true. Build the simplest possible test to check it. Measure real behavior, not opinions. And learn before you build more. That's it. That's the loop. And then you repeat it. You don't start with answers, you discover them. Stop building blindly. Start testing deliberately. Because the entrepreneurs who win aren't always the ones with the best ideas. They're the ones who learn fastest. If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing. You can check out some of my other videos on screen. I'll see you in the next one.